there seems to be a lot of buying of risk assets. I'm not sure, I really don't know. Like I think
Yeah.
that Bitcoin now is traded like any other macro asset, $2 trillion, it's big enough. It's not like it in its own little bubble in its own cycle now, and we are orbiting macro. So if that turns, Bitcoin will turn as well. And of course, when macro goes up or down, Bitcoin's, very accelerated. It's like that on steroids. So, um, but long term over the next 4, 8 years, of course, it's going to continue to outperform every single asset class on the planet. I'm on that boat too, actually. I am expecting things to crash really hard sooner or later. And it's really hard. It's like kind of like playing chicken with a freight train,
Mhm.
if you want to time the top. Um, right now, I model the stuff and quantitatively. The risk is high, meaning that the liquidity, the buyers, the spot buyers there isn't keeping up with effectively the price action that's happening. So we the risk is high for a drawdown, and it could turn on us. Um, I think the shape of the economy is not that great.
Mhm.
I think it's really hard to tell. Like if we're talking over the next what does it look like over the next year or two. Um, I think we're due for a pullback. But when, and that is quite hard to time, I think. Um, right now, there seems to be a lot of buying of risk assets. I'm not sure, I really don't know. Like I think
Yeah.
that Bitcoin now is traded like any other macro asset, $2 trillion, it's big enough. It's not like it in its own little bubble in its own cycle now, and we are orbiting macro. So if that turns, Bitcoin will turn as well. And of course, when macro goes up or down, Bitcoin's, very accelerated. It's like that on steroids. So, um, but long term over the next 4, 8 years, of course, it's going to continue to outperform every single asset class on the planet.
Do you think we will somehow extend the fiat era through like a Bitcoin backed dollar? And this kind of goes to the question I was going to ask about, do you think there's going to be a strategic Bitcoin reserve? Because a lot of people are talking about how behind the scenes, like the powers that be, they already know that Bitcoin is what they're going to need to adopt next. They're going to need to back treasuries with Bitcoin. What are your thoughts on that?
Like we had a gold standard and that did really get rugged. And I think that when you back a dollar with Bitcoins, you still have a very flawed system because you've created the gold standard, which is absolutely rugged, right? The problem with the gold standard is you have one one location that holds the gold. And so during Bretton Woods, there was an agreement, and the US, having, championed the victory over the World War II, we will reconstruct the world, but, you're going to use the US dollars, and we're going to put all the gold in Fort Knox, and trust me, bro, I'm good for
Mhm.
it, right? And it got rugged
Yeah.
in 1971. And what it did was it centralized all the countries to the US dollar so that now we're going to go to fiat and we can all stay on fiat and not have that country on the gold standard and the guys on fiat sort of waning over time. And so if you get a Bitcoin backed dollar and it's still the US dollar being the reserve currency, we're back there where it's centralized. It's a lot better because we have real time auditability of the reserves. So you can't easily say, um, you know, we're going to snip it, and we've never audited the gold supply backing all the world's currency is so crazy. So I think that it's a lot better, but it's still weak because you've got one entity holding so much Bitcoin to back a dollar, and I just don't trust that setup. I don't think that's the right solution. I think that there's all manner of crafty things that a nation state can do um, to get us off a Bitcoin standard and back to fiat.
I saw that you predicted that one Satoshi would be 5 cents. And so $5 million Bitcoin. How do we get there? And what are your concerns as far as like things that might prevent us from reaching that?
Yeah, I mean, I also said, don't worry about the path to getting there. Look, I think that honestly, we're looking at this long range view, and like my favorite topic to talk about now is the long range view across 6,000 years of gold and silver as money, and where does it go, say, 6,000 years to the future? And we're transitioning from using atoms, some atoms with nice properties, gold, silver, that's hard to get more of, into um, a money backed or constructed from energy.
Mhm.
And the fiat thing doesn't count because it's a 50-year liquidity crisis, and we're overing this this time, this short time, right? It's not even a human lifetime when we're talking about 6,000 years. So if you go into the future, you cannot, create a scarce commodity. Right now, I think we caught the SpaceX rocket booster for the second time. That thing will allow us to mine the solar system. There's no scarcity in gold or silver, absolutely not. And if you're looking 6,000 years in the future, even 50 years in the future, so the only way to secure a scarcity is with energy, because energy is always going to be scarce. Your economy, as it grows more, it's going to eat more energy to produce the stuff we want, and
Mhm.
so you've got to share it with the economy, and that means also that energy is scarce for securing the Bitcoin ledger. So that will work. I'm not saying the people say energy will be abundant. Yeah, but we'll use also abundance of the energy as well, and it'll all be consumed. So it'll be in check. So, like, what I'm saying is fiat money is going to die because we know that from every civilization never survived. I'm saying that we need to get onto a commodity money, and gold and silver is not a possibility given the technology landscape. So
Right.
therefore, the only way we can secure money is with energy, and we've got Bitcoin, and it's got there's no second best. It's got 15 plus 16 years of head start of adoption. There's not
Mhm.
even a single competitor. Like, what's the next one? It's not Ethereum, that's proof of stake. And it's not geopolitically decentralized. It's not secured by energy. It's secured by like fiat. It's social consensus. Everyone agrees
Mhm.
um, that this thing has value. So the next one is Litecoin, I think. Right. That's so we've only got Bitcoin. So if you look at what if it's gonna be the money for the entire economy, then money, all the money in the system equals world GDP and roughly all the value of the publicly listed companies. 100 trillion, 100 trillion, 100 trillion. They've always been relatively in check because you need this amount of money for this amount of
Mhm.
trade and this amount of
Yeah.
producing businesses. So that today is roughly 100 trillion, and that gives you the 5 cents.
Mm.
So it'll get there, and don't worry about how it's going to get there. But if you look at when it'll get there, you just trace the adoption curve of Bitcoin till it reaches near saturation, and
Mhm.
maybe that's 15 years or something like that. So that's it. And how it'll fail is if Bitcoin fails.
I wanted to ask you about Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy. It's been interesting to
Hmm.
follow some of the developments in the space. So what do you think about his strategy?
It's very clever, and I think only a veteran of public markets and a CEO that had a generation of understanding what you can do with a public company could have created this. Because really, it's clever, right? He's created a effectively a 2x leverage instrument on Bitcoin. And if you look at the risks to liquidation, it's almost he's bet the company on it. It's the thing is he's only liquidated if Bitcoin fails to gain value over the course of around, let's say, 6 to 7 years. If it doesn't gain value, then the convertible debt they won't convert to equity. Therefore, he'll have to sell bitcoins to then pay the debt back. I've like for the next probably 10 years, he's going to be very very safe from that. We've never ever seen Bitcoin drop below that in a consistent way. Like even if it wicks down, it's fine. He's not liquidated, right?
Right.
It's got to be 6 to 7 years later. These investors are not converting to equity, and then he's got to pay them out in cash. So it's very clever, and the leverage comes from the market effectively valuing it as a 2x because effectively you got that ATM and the convertible instruments that are accretive on Bitcoin. It's non-dilutive. You get more Bitcoins per share, so it's kind of like a pseudo yield, and therefore you can value it, more than 1 to 1 to the underlying NAV. So it's super clever. I mean, um, genius. Yeah, it's good bit of engineering, I would say.
Yeah, from an engineer. I
Uh,
mean, that's what his background is. Yeah, I know a lot of people that have done great on Bitcoin, but even better on MicroStrategy. So, but it's also interesting to read the TradFi people look at this and just their minds are blown, right? They
mm.
cannot wrap their heads around it. They're so critical. They're calling it all these names, and it's like, I mean, why is it so hard for people to just, I don't know, be open to a new idea and study it before they go so hard at criticizing it?
Yeah, because fundamentally, there's a lot to understand about the strategy. Like, they will understand what he's using in the traditional instruments with the ATMs and the convertible debt, but they don't understand Bitcoin. That's very clear. And so to understand Bitcoin, you have to understand the fundamental technology, you need to understand hard money, you need to understand the adoption curve of technology. There's a whole lot of things. And a lot of the stuff is, the venture capitalists will understand that more, the technologists will understand that more. But those are the guys that won't be necessarily understanding the TradFi side of things. And the TradFi guys, you know, they I mean, they're coming into Bitcoin now, but I think we probably need to wait another 4 years for them to really get it. I work with TradFi guys, and some of them really understand it, and you can see these guys that when they understand it, they will hold MicroStrategy and they love it, and they just love it. They're like, can't go wrong with it, and so you need to understand both. And there's no incentive if you're really managing very large billions of dollars
Mhm.
in digital, not sorry, in assets. You're probably incentivized also to keep doing what you're doing and not tell your investors like this is a great investment. Because you can't replicate that as an asset manager. You can't replicate that in the TradFi world for most people unless you have your own public company. And and it can't be just a new company. It can't be any of these new companies that are also following the MicroStrategy playbook because um, you need acceptance in the market. MicroStrategy is like over 25 years old.
Right.
Banks recognize it. There's a low risk to this company. It's been in the market so long. There's a decent treasury. All the numbers are solid. So the risk rating is so low on it that you can do this kind of stuff. Seasoned CEO. Yeah, it's only Michael that is in the sweet spot where he understands technology,
Yeah.
understands the instrument he's playing, a public company. Yeah, there's a whole lot of things that have to align. So I do think it's pretty genius.